Your girl would have croaked. I would have been del muerto. I would have been gone. Hello loves, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the history drag queen and welcome back to another history video. I know it's been a hot second. I apologize. I've been on a little bit of a break and then I kind of had to do a different break because I won an award from the city that I live in. Sorry, my bad. But anywhoosers, today we are talking about the Victorian era. So before I was Miss Drag Queen History over here on the tube of you, I actually was a decently known influencer on a different platform. And what I was mostly known for in like the 2021-22 era was being the Victorian Barbie, being like the Victorian drag girl. And I have made probably at least 80 to 100 videos on the Victorian and or Gilded Age era. So, but one of my favorite stories and tales of that era is actually the story and kind of tragedy, kind of warning of Sheele's green. I did a little green eye today for just the occasion. Now, just to preface this, the American Gilded Age and the British Victorian Age are the same time period. It's just America calls it the Gilded Age, the, European and like British countries call it the Victorian Age because of Queen Victoria. Now, let's talk about Sheele's green. You're probably asking, Miss Wendy, what is Sheele's green? Well, Sheele's green was a very specific shade of green pigment that was invented by a man named Charles Scheele. And it also unalived a lot of people. But wait, Miss Wendy, how does a color make a lot of people go forever night night? Well, let me tell you, and let's start off with the man who invented Sheele's green, Charles Scheele. Charles Scheele was actually a German-Swedish pharmaceutical chemist who was born in 1742 in Stralsund, which is in western Pomerania, which was at the time the Holy Roman Empire. His mother's name was Margarita and his father's name was, I think it's pronounced Hokum? Hokum? Maybe, I don't know. But he was a grain dealer and a brewer. So some friends of his parents actually showed him how to read pharmacy and prescriptions, as well as chemical and pharmaceutical signs and things. And so when he was 14, he actually went off to be an apprentice pharmacist. Flash forward to 1770, Scheele actually becomes a director of this pharmacy in, I think it's Locke. And so Charles Scheele is actually not mostly known for Scheele's green. He's actually mostly known for not inventing, but finding out a bunch of chemical things. He's actually argued to have either invented or found out about certain chemical equations and elements like barium, manganese, and tungsten, as well as very well-known chemical formulas like lactic acid, citric acid, and hydrogen cyanide, fluoride, and sulfide. So yeah, he's kind of an important-ish person in chemistry. Well, another well-known chemical compound that he invented and or found out is actually copper arsenite, aka Scheele's green. Copper arsenite was a pigment that replaced some older green pigments like copper carbonate. And in the Victorian era, Scheele's green was used for pretty much anything that had to do with green. Toys for children, wallpapers, tapestries, fabrics, books, paints, candles, candies, foods. Well, Miss Wendy, you're making this big hubbub. What's the issue? Well, copper arsenite is made by mixing copper, oxygen, and arsenic. And if you don't know, arsenic is kind of one of the most deadly toxins and poisons that exist. The tagline for arsenic is literally the king of poisons and the poisons of kings. Because it is probably one of the most deadly poisons that exists in the world, and it was used throughout history to do some not so cool, awesome, chill things. So now to preface this, They knew arsenic was bad. They knew it was poisonous to, like, mix it with anything. Like, they knew, divas. They knew in the Victorian era, in the Gilded, they knew that mess was poisonous, but it was pretty. But the issue is when arsenic is mixed with anything, it has the ability to become a gaseous state, especially when certain processes happen to it, like heat. And I don't know about you, but there very much was not like HVAC and AC in the Victorian and Gilded Ages. Now, why is this an issue? Well, in the Victorian era, two things rose into crazy popularity. And that was wallpapers and fake flowers. And of course, the green pigment of the time was copper arsenite, Scheele's green. So, any type of green wallpaper, any type of green paint, pigment, anything that was green, was most likely made with copper arsenite. And wallpaper, thank goodness this is brown, at the time, growing crazy popularity, people are like, oh, green, it's the it color, Well, one of the first, like, lethal tales of how dangerous Scheele's green was is actually a tragedy. So, trigger warning if you don't like hearing about unaliving of things and people going night-night forever, just maybe skip ahead. There was a family in London whose 4 children just passed away. And all of them passed of respiratory distress, is what they called it. And after doing some more investigations, they had realized their room, the bedroom of the children, had just recently been wallpapered green. And they did tests on that wallpaper, and for each square foot of the wallpaper, it had 3 grams or grains of arsenic in it, which is enough to, like, unalive somebody. Like, that little square, enough to, like, have somebody croak. And it was wallpapered their entire room. Those poor kiddos. So let's get into the wallpaper situation specifically. A very famous wallpaper designer and manufacturer called, yeah, not saying it out loud just in case, just for, and things. Well, that designer owned a hefty share of his father's mining company, which was the largest mining company of arsenic. Yeah. And that said designer was quoted as saying, "It's all a big witch hunt and scare. It's nothing, girl." But then, in around 1870-ish, he started seeing a different tune, and he actually bowed to the public's reception of copper arsenite and Scheele's green, and stopped using arsenic-based dyes in his work around like 1870, 1871. So there's that. At least there was, he did eventually stop using it, but not until a lot of people had like went night-night forever. So yeah. Now, I'm not trying to like say all this to like drag people through the mud and everything else like that, but it just needs to be explained that in the Victorian era and the American Gilded Age was kind of like the birth of capitalistic corruption when it comes to business and consumerism. Yeah, there probably was some way back in the days, but in those eras, in around the 1800s, that is when it became kind of like, oh, that's a problem. That's going to be a problem later on. Yeah, but they didn't care. And a lot of the modern issues of the day can actually be traced back to Gilded Age and Victorian era corruption. So yeah. To reiterate, a lot of people passed from Scheele's green and the effects of being poisoned by it. I mean, it was literally in food dyes, in candies. It was in children's toys, paint, wallpaper, like I listed before. And also, your girl would have been gone. Del Muerto. Green is my literal favorite color. It would have been over for me. I would like, it would have been bad. Like, green is my all-time favorite color. All shades of green, except maybe neon. But sometimes it's, applicable. But it was in everything green. I would have been toast. But Miss Wendy, when did all this end? Like, we don't use copper arsenite and pigments anymore, right? Yeah, we don't. Because of the tale of 19-year-old Matilda Scheele. And because of what happened to her in 1861, they kind of like phased out almost all production of arsenic like compound dyes. Matilda, known mostly by her community as a very lovely, awesome, amazing girl. She was also super pretty. It was noted that several different people had said that. She was very good looking. And she was just a sweet girl. Everybody loved her. And Matilda actually worked for a man, Mr. Bergeron, who had this warehouse who made fake flowers. And Matilda's job at the warehouse was actually to dust Scheele's green pigment on flower crowns, like fake artificial flower crowns. And after some examinations, it's theorized that each flower crown that Matilda made had enough arsenic to night 20 people. 20 people! And no ma'am, she wasn't wearing a mask. No ma'am, no gloves. They didn't do that mess. Another kind of warning, kind of a graphic warning, the reason why it was taken so seriously is how graphic and kind of disturbing Matilda passed away. Because the press and her mother were very transparent about it and pretty much told everybody the same thing. Like, they were very transparent. Yeah, this is what happened to her. And what I'm about to read is actually quite literally what her mother, who was also a widower, poor girl, put in her obituary and the story of her in the paper. Matilda started convulsing and she started vomiting hypergreen water and bile and foam from her mouth. And the whites of her eyes and her nails turned the eerie yellow-green color of Scheele's green. Scheele's green! The whites of her eyes and her fingernails turned like hyper Scheele's green. As well as her entire body had a hue and shade of Scheele's green. Oh. Now, after this was found out, Mr. Bergeron, like her boss, the guy who like ran the warehouse that all the girls like were dusting Scheele's green with flowers on, he offered them like masks to wear masks and stuff, but the girls were like, it get too hot. No, it get too hot. We don't want to wear masks. It's gonna get too hot. And so he was like, okay, well, you girls, I can't have you girls, like, dealing with this poisonous chemical and, like, So he just kind of phased out of the arsenic production of dyes as well as everybody else did. So he just stopped using that specific green. And because of Matilda's story, the public favor of Scheele's green and copper arsenite pigments kind of fell out of favor. And manufacturers then slowly stopped using Scheele's green and copper arsenite pigments and arsenic-based pigments in their items around the 1870s. A fun thing to note, Napoleon Bonaparte, yeah, you know, Mr. Napoleon Bonaparte, may or may not have died from Scheele's green. Yeah. Also, to reiterate, not all manufacturers and things stopped using Scheele's green, because Scheele's green and Paris green, which is another toxic green, was actually used in insecticides and pesticides in the 1930s. Why? I don't know. So what are your thoughts on Scheele's green? Would you have fallen for the green death? I mean, me, yeah, your girl would have. I would have been gone. Unfortunately. Put your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stick around because you just might learn something.